April from Sew Local Stitch Lounge. This is my son Asher, and today we are going to make this very sweet pennant banner. Alright, so to make our pennant banner, we need some extra wide double fold bias tape, and we have 5 fabrics in the kit, and a pattern piece, that's the triangle for the pennant, and then we just need some pins, scissors, and if you have fabric glue, that's very helpful for this project. Alright, so our first step is to cut out our paper triangle piece right along the edges. And you'll notice in your kit that you have some different sizes of fabric. That's just because some of the fabrics are directional. So these cats, for example, when you're using your pattern piece, you're going to want your cats not to be upside down or sideways, so there's enough fabric for that. And then some of the other fabrics that don't have a specific direction, they're narrower because your triangle can lay the other way. Our next step is to start cutting out our triangles. So I gave enough fabric so that we could do 10. We'll do 4 triangles from each fabric, which will give us 2 pennants from each one. So you're going to take your piece of fabric, this one's folded in half, and if you have nice sharp scissors, you should be able to fold this one more time so you can cut out 4 at a time. If you struggle with this, then just do it in 2 separate pieces instead. So Asher, you can go ahead and put a triangle on here. Yep. So you're just going to pin it in place and then cut around the edge. And you're going to do this, like I said, to all of your fabric, and you need 4 from each one. Remember, if you're using your directional fabrics, that you want to make sure that whatever you're cutting out is not going to be upside down. So you'll want to put it on like this. And I like to cut mine over to the side a bit if I can, that way I might have a little bit of extra fabric to use for something else later on. Now that we have our 20 triangles cut out, we're going to start pinning them right sides together. And we're going to do that, we're going to divide them all into pairs. Okay. So you really want to make sure that these are lined up nicely because our seam allowance isn't that big and it's really easy to miss the other fabric if they're not all lined up straight. We're going to be sewing around these 2 edges here and leaving the top edge open. We're using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you have to make sure to backstitch at the beginning and then again at the end. When you get to your corner, you're going to pivot. So we're just going to make sure the needle's down, lift up your presser foot, and then turn your fabric. We have all of our pieces sewn now, and we're going to be turning them right side out so they look like this. But before you do that, you're going to trim the bottom like this. And that's just going to help your corners poke out nicely so you get a nice sharp corner on your pieces. Then you're going to turn it right side out, and you can use a stick or a pencil, and you're going to poke out that bottom corner. I'll usually run it along the side seams as well, just to make sure those are all the way out. Okay, so next we get to iron these triangles. So when you're doing that, you want to make sure that the sides are all the way poked out so that you have kind of a crisp edge right here. If it stays folded under and you iron it, your triangle is going to be a lot smaller than it should be. So we just poke those out and then go ahead. Now that we have them all pressed, you're going to trim the tops. So you want them to be a nice straight line. So we're just going to trim off any parts on the corners that are in the way, because we have to put it inside the bias tape. We want it to be able to line up nicely. Okay, so you're going to take your bias tape and measure about 10 inches. And that's going to be the extra bias tape we have at the end to tie your pennant banner onto something or to be able to pin it up. So I'm just going to put a little pin here to mark it so I know where that is. And then we're going to grab one of your pennants. You're going to open up your bias tape. And if you are using glue, you can put a little bit of glue right on here. And then take one of these. You're going to lay it in here so that the edge is lining up with the center fold. And then you can put a little bit of glue along the top and close that up. And if you don't have fabric glue, you're just going to do the same thing but with no gluing. And either way, you should put some pins. So if you're gluing it, 2 pins should be lots, and if you're not, you could put it in a few extra pins. And then you want to check the back. Make sure that it was caught properly on the back as well. And then we're ready for our next one. When I put the next pennant in, I usually just leave about 1/2 inch or so in between. So then we're going to do the exact same thing. You're just going to put some glue and then pick a different print. Line it up on that center fold. Then we're going to be sewing these in place after we get them. And after each pennant, you're going to want to check to make sure that it's catching on the back. So this one looks good, but this is getting kind of folded up. So if I was going to sew this, it wouldn't look that great. So I'm going to fix it right now. Try that again. It's better. Okay, and go ahead, Asher. Okay, so we have all of our pieces pinned, and I'm just going to measure the other end, the tail piece, and I want it to be 10 inches so that it matches the first side that we left some space on. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to be sewing it starting at the beginning of the bias tape where there's no pennant pieces. So we're going to sew really close to this edge, and we're going to go all the way down to the other end, back stitching at the beginning and back stitching at the end. Okay, so we have our bias tape. It's just folded in half. And we're going to be sewing around, right around here, kind of close to this edge. And you're going to back stitch at the beginning. You notice I'm not going super close to the edge. That's just to make sure that we're catching both sides. That's especially important when you're going over here. You don't want to be too far up, but you don't want to be right on the edge in case you don't catch it on the back. And then I'll just take a look to make sure it's catching. It is. When you're going to sew your next pennant, it's really important because sometimes these corners want to pop out. You make sure that it's tucked right up in there.
Wow!